Let's talk about Yuta versus Kenjaku. With Takaba currently fighting Kenjaku in the manga, I think it's time to bring up their potential fight in the future. While I do think that Takaba will put up a decent fight against Kenjaku, I don't think he will be the one to permanently defeat him, and I still think Yuta will have a confrontation. We've had this fight set up a few times in the manga already. Kenjaku mentions Yuta a lot, and Yuta himself was trying to hunt down Kenjaku during the Culling Games. And while Yuta may be less important in this series than he was in JJK 0, he is still a legacy main character, and he is set up as the premier powerhouse after Gojo in the manga so far. I'm not going to take a look at his power compared to Hikari and Maki in this video. They are obviously incredibly strong as well, but for the most part, Yuta, he is presented as the Himithi of their team, and that is great and all, but what chance does he actually have against Kenjaku? So first of all, let's take a look at Kenjaku, because Kenjaku calls Yuta nothing special, and you kind of understand where he's coming from when you look at it from the perspective that he has known Sukuna for over 1,000 years, and Sukuna, he is busted. So it kind of makes sense, but I still think that Kenjaku underestimates Yuta, and that's kind of the point here. But all that being said, the greatest obstacle to Yuta's victory here would be the Kenjaku domain expansion. It's kind of hard to downplay a Kenjaku domain when it is hyped to the upper echelon of the verse by Tengen herself. If you don't get past this, you die, and I think that is a huge reason why they were willing to send Maki in against Kenjaku, because she is one of the only characters with a guaranteed way past the sure hit. I see a lot of confusion around this domain and how Yuki survived it, and a lot of people seem to think that Yuta can survive it just because she did, and that's not necessarily true. But the thing here is that Yuki survived against this domain because of Tengen's intervention disrupting the sure hit. Because really, this is just the reversal of the anti-gravity he was using on a greater scale, so it really shouldn't have stopped after one crush. And even if it did, we've seen characters use multiple sure hits in their domains. There's no reason he couldn't do another one. Or at the very least, he would not have been burnt out. So Tengen, she did a lot more than people give her credit for here. She may have goofed a bit, but she did save Yuki temporarily. So how the hell does Yuta get past this domain? Well, there are a few things here, in that Yuki's plan was told to her by Tengen, and she intentionally did not open up her domain. And even Kenjaku notes that had Yuki opened up her domain, the results would not have been so boring. And since this fight happened, we have had new information on domains from Gojo versus Sukuna, and we really got the answer that just because you have an open barrier and your barrier skills are better, because Sukuna and Kenjaku, they are both better barrier users than Gojo is. But despite this, when we saw the clash of their sure hits, they were evenly matched. So while Kenjaku's domain is incredibly overpowered, I don't think that we should just write off Yuta simply because of its barrier refinement. So let's humor the idea that Yuta Okotsu does not get a hydraulic press dropped on his head, because like Kenjaku said to Yuki, that's a boring outcome. This is where I think this fight becomes a lot more fun to speculate on, because both these characters, they have wildly varied abilities, and while we don't have confirmation that Kenjaku has a fourth technique stored, it is probably the case, because there simply is not a lot of point for Gege to bring this up as Yuki speculation. And the same can be said for Yuta's ability to copy curse techniques, because while it is presented as being unconditional originally, it is implied in Sendai that Rika is required to ingest a portion of the user to copy their curse technique. And while this was just speculation on Ryu's part, it's probably true as well, because there is just not a lot of reason to bring this up. And usually in JJK, when an ability is explained, it is less powerful than people initially expected. Because restrictions and limitations to powerful movesets, that is the bread and butter of Jujutsu. And this is the same reason that when Kenjaku is confronted by Takaba's incredibly powerful technique, he still thinks, okay, there has to be a weakness. Because at the end of the day, every single curse technique has a terms and conditions. And speaking of curse techniques, let's talk more about Yuta's. Yuta has a large stockpile of curse techniques. Granted, we only get to see a few of them, and we can go into speculation on what some of these may be later, but for now, I want to cover the ones we know of, because Yuta, he loves spamming that curse speech. And really, there are few tools in JJK as effective at clearing a legion of trash as curse speech. And more recently, Yuta obtained Sky Manipulation. And I would go as far to say that Sky Manipulation is the best hand-to-hand defense you are going to find outside of an Infinity Barrier. And let's not forget that Kenjaku, he is one of the best hand-to-hand combatants in JJK, stated to be on the same level as Gojo. Personally, I have always seen that as more of a Gojo feat, because Kenjaku is like 1,000 years old. It's not that impressive to be the same level as a 28-year-old's hand-to-hand. But the point here is, whatever difference there is in hand-to-hand with Yuta and Kenjaku, I still think Yuta could bridge the gap with a copied curse technique. And this brings me to Rika, because Rika, she really is the linchpin to pretty much everything Yuta does. And according to Kenjaku, retaining her soul was the reason he is able to copy curse techniques and why he has boundless curse energy. And an interesting thing about Rika is that she remains active even when Yuta opens the domain and imbues a sure hit. So no matter what you do, you're pretty much stuck in the 2v1 against one of the strongest quote-unquote Shikigami and Yuta. And I really don't think it is a hot take to say that Yuta and Rika could put up a pretty good fight against Kenjaku if we take the domain out of the equation. Whether or not you think the sure hit Gravity Crush could destroy the exterior of Yuta's domain, I've seen a lot of arguments for both sides on this. Sukuna really did have an excellent technique to destroy the exterior of Gojo's barrier with Cleave and Dismantle. Because Cleave and Dismantle, those are some pretty amazing tools to slap apart a barrier on repeat. Especially when Sukuna had a tool like Cleave that can adjust to the cursed energy of the target, and that should include a barrier if it's targeting it. I personally lean in the direction that Kenjaku's domain, it could probably start to break down Yuta's barrier, but Yuta is also aware now that Kenjaku has an open barrier. And the maximum Uzumaki that Kenjaku possesses, this thing pretty much never does anything worthwhile. The micro Uzumaki has done infinitely more than nothing. And let's talk about Rika Blast, because I think that Rika Blast is on the same level as Maximum Uzumaki, even if it was able to match a weakened Granite Blast, but I just think that's because Granite Blast is above Uzumaki. I don't know if putting Granite Blast above Uzumaki is a hot take, because usually I am not ranking Sukuna jobbers, except for the one and only Dice Tomato King Kashimo. But on the topic of the current Kenjaku fight, today is the day that they are planning to body Kenjaku. So if Yuta is going to fight him, he's not going to be the front runner already, and we see Takaba showing up, and Kenjaku, he's not Gojo or Sukuna. So he's got to be a lot more selective on when he uses his domain expansion, and if Takaba forces it out of him, well, I think Yuta has a far superior shot. The Takaba Kenjaku fight starts pretty much immediately after Gojo got cut in half. And Yuta is suspiciously nowhere to be found against Sukuna along with Maki. And quite frankly, killing Sukuna is important, but it's not as important as killing Kenjaku. A world with Sukuna is inferior to a world without Sukuna, but Sukuna's plans, they are not the world enders. But for a character like Lieutenant General Gary Johnson, a world with Sukuna pretty much doesn't change his life at all. And while Kenjaku does know if people leave the barrier, if Takaba is keeping him busy, I don't know what he's going to do about it. Is he going to call up Sukuna and say, bro, they're beating my ass. Sorry, man, I'm having a court trial, no phones allowed. So really, if they need to kill Kenjaku, this seems like the best opportunity to do it, because that's the guy who has to die. And that's not even to mention the 1 month of training, the fact that he was willing to fight Mahoraga and Agito. I think Yuta's a lot stronger than people give him credit for at the moment. Considering Yuji has gotten a new power-up that we have yet to see the full extent of, but he's not going to die instantly against Sukuna, I think we should expect a similar thing for Yuta. And even though at the end of the day, I put Kenjaku above Yuta in pretty much every category, I still think that Yuta has a shot, even if it's an uphill battle, and that's kind of the point. And Kenjaku, he just seems like the logical final boss for Yuta, because Yuta, he's not going to be the one to kill Sukuna. And if Gojo was still alive and had a lower body, I would expect him to be the one to kill Kenjaku, because Kenjaku is out here with Geto's body, his best friend. And we will likely see a full-on group fight with Kenjaku. Still, I think Yuta will have the final blow, because Takaba, I just don't see him being the one to finally beat Kenjaku. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think that Yuta has a chance? Do you think he will be the one to beat Kenjaku? I know this video took me forever to get out, and I haven't glazed Yuta in a while, so it was about time. I will also be making some videos on Toji's importance in JJK and Sukuna's ideology, because I think those have recently become a pretty important topic. So if you like content like this, subscribe for more, and as always, thanks for watching.